statement beginning during 2012-13. That to me is gobbledygook. Well, the second part of it is this was mainly due to a downward valuation of 1.42 million for the council offices, resulted in a 1.316 million impairment charged to the cost of services because there were insufficient previous revaluation gains in the revaluation reserve for council offices. That is...
I didn't attempt to understand. I didn't attempt to understand that.
That is... We really can't send out documents with rubbish like that, with great respect. What? Please may somebody put that in English.
If you can knock your light off, Councillor.
Oh, sorry.
The responsibility we'll have another go, but basically what it means is that the
Which resulted?
oh well, yeah.
For the council offices.
I mean the key issue is that the impairment was larger than the revaluation reserve, and therefore it had to be charged. The balance that wasn't in the revaluation reserve had to be charged to services.
Okay, so the point is, yeah. Can you rewrite that paragraph in words that somebody can understand, because it's helping. Sorry, Councillor Leake, you have another point? Yes? No. I
apologise for reading these, but that's what we're here for. I thought.
Absolutely, and I think it's a point well made. None of us can quite.
Right over the page. I think I asked this before, but I'd like a further explanation of on the table of significant revaluations, and it's not about Manydown, it's about St Andrew's Medical Centre. Can you just remind me why it's gone up and gone down?
Yeah, I think because it was previously valued at its end point before all of the capital expenditure had been incurred. So it was previously valued at the value it would have once it was completed, whilst it was still an asset under construction. So it was, in effect, it was probably slightly overvalued in the previous year.
So it's not worth as much as it costs.
I don't know how much it cost us. It can't tell me from there exactly how much it cost. But what it's doing is saying we spent another 1.557 million during the year, and the overall value based on the rental stream and the assumption about the rental stream is 3.1 million. And we previously valued it at 3.7 million. So
I think I'm right.
it was an asset under construction.
We paid more for it than it was worth, roughly. Doesn't that sound like it? Anyway, look, we don't feel we have to... No, okay. Yes, could you, at the bottom of page 78, there's been significant change. There was a significant change in the debtors of less than 3 months, and I can't. I think actually you've highlighted it somewhere, but I can't remember. What was the reason? We originally had 685,000, which has suddenly become 1.257 million, which is a very large increase in the aged debts. Why was that? What happened there?
I think we highlighted that. We did highlight that one in the report. I think it was just an error in calculating in using the table. Somebody took the wrong dates or the wrong period to do the calculation of what was outstanding. So that was corrected in the between the first draft and the final draft.
It is quite a large error, though, isn't it? I mean, can we be assured there aren't other similar large errors?
The total balance in the bottom of that note was always correct. It was just the split, just the analysis of the individual lines. So there is not, it's a classification error rather than an error in the debtors number in and of itself. And it was one of the things we identified during the course of the audit that hadn't been analysed correctly. So I don't think there are any more errors in the accounts that are material. And actually that error in itself was material.
Not in your terms, I accept that, but actually what you've just said isn't strictly true, because the original number, I think, was 1769 as the total, and it's now 2341.
Yeah, so essentially what happened was the listing that was used to work out the length that the invoices were owed was sorted on the dates that the invoice was issued, and the starting date that was taken for that first category was incorrect. So the total, it worked on a list of total debtors, and then extracted any that were over 3 months old. But it's just the first time that calculation was done, it actually started from anything that was older than, I think, 4 months old. So we can be confident that it's correct because it's gone back to the correct date cut-off now.
And officers have learnt that they need to be more careful, have they? Thank you.
Councillor Parker, you had a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to, a very important point was raised just now by Councillor Leake with regard to the Section 106 contributions, and it was in that particular discussion with Kevin that identified of the 1.614 million that we've received some, but there's still other monies outstanding. And I think we should perhaps tighten up the request that John made, because we have as a committee already requested the report on to be presented at some time in the future on Section 106, but that just is recorded as saying the process that covers identification of contributions, how they are monitored and how they're spent in future projects. So, but I think we would like also, if committee members agree, for it to also look at how do we tighten up the process to ensure that payment is actually received. This is linked with planning application, and I think we want to be certain we're looking at that aspect of it as well, please.
So can you remind me where that report? You said you said you. No, sorry. It was you mentioned a report's already been requested on Section 106 contributions, and that's coming for this. Right. Okay. Thank you. That concludes questions, members. Do we wish to have a debate on this paper? Or are we content? Yes, okay. Are you content then that, in terms of where we're at, I think the key points this time was that we agreed that in future we would see the base budget at the starting position with variances rather than a sort of moving goalposts position. That we would, where we are making comments on particular numbers in the report, if we start with the trend of putting year-on-year comparisons for one item, we should make sure that's consistent throughout other similar references. Councillor Parker has asked to provide a separate copy of the table at item 20, page 93, which reflects pension contributions, and that should be circulated to members of the committee in response to that request. Some comments made about the additional paragraph 5 at page 63, which is about the economic situation. We asked by Councillor Leake about the change in value of St Andrew's Medical Centre at page 74, so we just need to come back with a short response on that. And that this committee wants us to more aggressively pursue perhaps outstanding Section 106 monies, and the report that's due to come forward should identify those organisations or developers who are not paying their monies, and so that we can actually know who they are and get the monies in. Councillor Parker, I've missed a point again.
Second there, Chair, but the point I'm making is that the report should be looking at a way of making that not so, that sort of, for us not to become Councillor Leake put it very bluntly, but what we want to be making sure that we do is that our process needs to be refined in such a way that it makes it harder for the developers to, because on a lot of occasions, well, possibly some occasions, the site's being developed, and we are still arguing about receiving the money. So there should be some mechanism that ensures whether they're bonded before they actually put a digger on site, or similar arrangement.
Okay, Councillor Leek and then Councillor Harvey.
Just could I can't remember whether or not you included in that list a rewriting of the sentence or paragraph which I said was gobbledygook, and I really would like that to be rewritten before these accounts go out.
Yes, that was the middle paragraph above, of 73, yes. Okay. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point in relation to Councillor Parker's and others' points on the planning side of things. It would be useful, I think, to reference what we've said here to Head of Planning and to the legal teams in the context of the conditions that they write. Because on occasions, those conditions may well not give us the protection that you're talking about, or at least the robustness that we're discussing here, and that would be a useful way of tying up that loose end, so that we're not always left picking up the pieces, but rather you've got it right at the front end. And particularly if we want that to be robust. It's not a planning matter of a local plan matter, it's not anything to do with a governance issue per se, but from a legal perspective, that would be a useful point to round that out.
Certainly, so we'll include the sort of the process, get it right first time sort of bit in the minutes, and make sure that we are, that we can reflect that to the wider teams, both legal and planning around. If it's explicit at the start, it's easier to enforce through the process and make sure we, as a committee, we're able to then track these things so that they are paid properly on time. Okay. With that concludes paper D, members. Yeah. Yes, I'm going to say this is a bit. So it's recommended that this committee approve the statement of accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2013, as set out in Appendix 1, and that the chairman of this meeting, me, will sign the statement responsibly is on page 49 to that effect. And that is what I shall do, with your blessing. Sorry, do you agree, members? Yes, I'm just doing it for you. Would you like to agree that? Agreed. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm becoming frivolous now. It's getting warm. Moves us on to paper E, which is our mini-down financial statement. And we have Philip here to introduce the paper, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first time you've seen this particular report. You saw a sort of draft version of it back in April, but the idea of the report is following on from the independent governance report to set out in one place all the information, all the financial information relating to the Manydown land. Since producing the report, we have had some figures from Hampshire County Council about the amount of officer time, or the cost of the officer time that they spent last year on work promoting Manydown, and that was £56,000. And that therefore means that the total net income figure that's quoted in paragraph 4.1 at the moment, it shows net income of 82,473. That now reduces to net income of 26,500. The reason that we have net income on Manydown is basically because the farm rents that we receive and the rents for the dwellings that are on the land there is higher than is spent in terms of maintaining the land, and in this case on promotion of the land. The report has got a breakdown of the JMC, the Joint Manydown Committee's expenditure, and that's the cost of running the land during the year. It's mainly to do with tree works, audit fees, county estates. They manage the land for us, so they spend officer time effectively again conversing with the tenants, sorting out any issues there are on the land. The report then goes on to show what both Basingstoke and Hampshire have spent in terms of promoting the land. There were two consultants' reports basically that were done, one by Tybalt and one by JMP. Those were jointly funded by the two councils, so you'll see the same amount of expenditure appearing both from Hampshire and from Basingstoke. Also, apologies for that. For some reason, when it was printing out, it's just put a page break in. There's no actual missing information. It just. Yes. The report also includes. Where do I get to? The historic spend on promotion of the land. We talked about what was being spent this year, but you can also see from the report that It shows in the report £810,000 have been spent. Again, that figure will have gone up by £56,000 now because of the cost of the officer time at Hampshire. So that takes it up to £866,000. That money should be recoverable if the land is developed from the land proceeds before it's shared between the Many Down Company or trustees and Basingstoke and Hampshire. Another thing included in the report is the valuation of the land. I think we talked about this at some point earlier, but it gives you the valuation figure 7.4 million. It explains in broad terms the basis for that valuation, and also included in the report is the amount which Hampshire would be due to pay if they wanted to buy their 50% share effectively in the land, their option price. That was the value as at the 31st of March. As at today, they still haven't paid that money, but we are expecting that at some point in this financial year that they will. Yes, I think we were expecting that it might happen before now, but they have to give us a month's notice. They haven't given us a month's formal notice yet. So, as it stands at the moment, they haven't purchased their share yet. I think that's all I had to say on it. Thank you.
I suspect there'll be some questions. Councillor Leake and then Councillor Harvey.
I've got a few. On page 145, the grant of 36,000 for the Jubilee Woodland. Why doesn't that actually go through the accounts, even if we receive a grant on one side and spend 36,000 on planting trees on the other side? It seems rather odd that it doesn't appear anywhere in the accounts.
It's a good question. Apparently it's a scheme which Hampshire County Council is operating on its own, so the fact it was spent on the Many Down land was coincidental. They do this woodland scheme, they apply for money, they can get the money in and they can then award it or grant it on different areas. So there was a report that went to the Joint Many Down or Joint Management Committee on this originally, showing that this was actually a county scheme, not a Many Down scheme.
So they can happily plant on our land because they haven't actually paid for it yet. So, my second point is on page 147. I was a little surprised to see the amount of time or staff time that we had devoted to promotion, bearing in mind that we only really began the promotion very late in the financial year, because prior to that we were not promoting it. And it seems to represent something like 10% of the staff time of those three individuals, which is a hell of a lot on out of their busy schedule, just promoting the Many Down land. So are we satisfied that that is the right number? Shall I do all my questions? And the next one's over the page 148. Where we show the annual expenditure, and my question there is, have we agreed those numbers with the trustees, or might we get a nasty shock when we present it and they say, hey ho, don't agree with this at all, because that might have an impact on us. And my final point is on the other table on the next page, the HCC option to purchase. What would happen if the option were not exercised?
Right. Starting with the scoping, what we have done to get to the for the staff time, the total of 25,974 for the three people here. The main person who spent time on this is Mike Bovis, who, from memory, he was estimating he'd spent a day and a half per week on this since about Christmas time, so about the last quarter of the year. And then, as far as Kevin and Tony are concerned, it was at more minor amounts, a few days, something of that order. But we've applied the hourly rates that we have for staff for it, and that's the figure that's resulted. So the county's figure was about double that, 55,000, and I've got the analysis of that, but the sort of work that was included in that was scoping the contracts and so on which were going to be awarded, and then doing some work on the feasibility study, but I don't know any more detail on that, I'm afraid. The
We were busy promoting. We were busy promoting it at that time, so we had every intention of promoting it. Thank you.
right. The next question. The question about has these numbers been agreed with the trustees? The short answer to that is no. These are the just a record of the historic information that we have. We have copies of all the invoices going back to 2001 when it was initially incurred, but that information has not been shared with the trustees yet. And the final question.
Sorry. So if they, I mean, these aren't numbers which are reflected in our balance sheet, are they? So we merely get back less than we thought we would get. It's not going to have an impact on the balance sheet, is that correct?
Okay. Yes, that's correct. There's nothing in the balance sheet recognising these values here. The last question about the what would be the effect if the option was not to be exercised. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. I guess probably someone from legal perhaps might be able to advise.
I don't want to waste a lot of time, but
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Harvey and then Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lee quite rightly has explored a few of the points I was wanting to make on page 147. But the point, I guess, is for the record picking out what prompted my question was the comparison between our office's time and that of our consultants. And then, where did that break down? And I think you've explored that. And then obviously the relationship to county in that context. Particularly as county haven't exercised their option yet. And how they then can still, even though they've not exercised their options, because those figures are going to be reclaimed, as it were, through the development value as and when it's realised, which is an issue for me in how county reclaims the costs if it then chooses not to exercise its particular purchase of the option. So from a legal perspective, in a future point, I'd quite like to understand that relationship, particularly, and this raises the issue on page 149, and I'll go there directly, to ask the question around, say county doesn't exercise its option, say we don't get that money and county sells its option, that's still a perfectly legal right for county to do that, isn't it? In which case then what does happen to all these costs that you're trying to account for?
Again, I'm afraid I don't know what the position would be if the county weren't to exercise the option. As we've said, there's nothing in the accounts, our accounts at the moment, showing this is money due to us, these development costs. If the county, I suppose you'd want to know whether if the county didn't exercise their option, whether you would offset just our costs that we'd incurred and not the county's costs, and then they wouldn't be able to recover those costs. But I don't know. Again, I think you probably need to get a legal opinion on that.
Well, I am concerned that if county hasn't yet paid up, and as others have said, that was expected, they haven't paid up yet. We are now well into the year, and I'd like to ask the question, where is it? It really is, and particularly because of the stages we've now moved through. It's not as if this thing isn't moving on, and county really need either to step up to the plate here, and from a governance and an audit and an accounts point of view, it is an outstanding issue, a rather large one. If I could just talk to the committee about 6.2 really, it plays on from the earlier conversation really. The language used there, from a planning point of view, from a point of view of the way we've discussed this, I have an issue with some of the way that Deloitte have kind of, it's their opinion, they're entitled to give it, they've given a comment. But I think for me, I have a sense of being uncomfortable with some of the language they're using there because of the context of a development partner that may future come in, because of how and what may happen in relation to what county may or may not do, and how the other partners may choose to proceed as well. Some of the language there for me sits uncomfortably with that, and I would like that to be on record, because obviously you can't challenge the comment. 6.2 is their comment, but I would not want it to go unchallenged in this forum formally this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, I think also remember that comment is in terms of them doing an accounting valuation for the statement of accounts, which needs to be considered. That's the context that they're giving that comment.
Thank you, Kevin. No, I agree, but again, that relates back to my previous conversation, which I'm not going to re-rehearse. But these words really do matter, because these are the words that others will refer to and will be referred to in the context of how this whole thing is progressing. My final question relates to really where we go with this, and I guess it's a question to Kevin and Philip in the context of process. When will we see a JDC established to proceed with the appropriate development processes and the appropriate disposal of, the appropriate analysis of? We can carry on with the JMC for as long as we like, but in the context of the agreement and where we need to be going with this, at some stage, we will need to see the transformation into a JDC. So when have you guys got that in your heads from your perspective of when you would like to see it, and do we have one similarly so from a landowning point of view, from any of the other members of other teams that are working on this?
I mean, I haven't got a date. I think there's one that we need to get. We need to go back and ask where we are corporately on that particular issue, and then we can update the committee, because there will be the JMC and the landowner processes. So I'm not aware of a particular timescale for re-establishing, but it's a question we can go back and ask, and then report back what the response is.
Can I just make sure that we capture that, because I would not want that to be lost. Principally, again, and my point again for commenters is we are moving on, and if we are moving on, then these matters need to be addressed, and they cannot be left hanging, because they relate to the agreement, the legal agreements that were signed, and the obligations of this authority in the way we approach the process and the land. And that's my concern, actually. We're now well past the JR judgment. We are well past the formalisation of the process in terms of the local plan and where we've got to. And I would be concerned, Kevin, and if you can feed this back up the chain, that this matter has been left, at least until sitting here now. And we need to resolve it, I would say, before the close of play at the end of this year. It cannot be left to go into the new year.
Councillor Parker and then Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm picking up also on the point, and I'm sorry if it's repetitive, on this business of the promotional work. And listening to colleagues' comments, I've always, now it would appear possibly naively, felt we as a local authority were in a strong position. But it's sounding as though in some aspects we are getting more and more vulnerable. It does look to me as though there's the potential where our partnership council, the Hampshire County Council, might be starting to view this as a bit of a cash cow situation. You see these fees coming in at £55,000, promotional work, and then the possibility is, a question mark that I have is what promotional work? Well, yes, maybe we're talking about legally documents and so forth. Why couldn't have that been? It's shared in costs, but why couldn't it have been shared in officer time? We seem to have two sets of officers possibly approaching the same problem, billing in separately. And other than in Philip's table, which is a very basic, which reasonably enough would be expected to be acceptable. We have a total figure here, but I've got to presume we have a breakdown that's in the file for subsequent audit trail of what they are charging out at, because you did give us the breakdown for our own officers. I assume we're getting that from the county council, because Paul has mentioned the need for a joint planning and development approach to this. It's in the very near future, really. But I think we also I would have thought we would be now moving in the direction of a joint promotional working group. And I'm surprised we aren't already at that stage.
I just come back to clarify one thing. The cost of the officer time by Hampshire County Council staff, that has been met entirely by Hampshire. It's not been shared between the two. So we've met our cost of officers' time at the moment. The county have met theirs. It's just that when it comes to, if the land is developed, recovering it back, then they get it back then. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Well, that's the point that I'm talking about, a degree of vulnerability here. Suddenly we're up to already on the very useful table you give us, the 810 figure. If this continues on, they'll say the work is increasing, more officer time required, and point made by Councillor Harvey is, well, okay, when do they call that invoicing? I think we've got to, I think somewhere along the line, Chair, and this is I think the officer needs stronger steer on this from the cabinet or from somewhere into the manner in which we are going to approach this as a local authority. And I think we need to sort of, as it were, get a bit more mature in our handling of HCC.
Certainly picking up a number of points about sort of better forward planning, mobilisation of sort of a joint resource to promote and deal with the prospects coming forward. Of course, all dependent on HCC exercising its option and paying up. So, Councillor Tucker, your question.
Thank you. First of all, can I just make a comment? Some time ago, quite some time ago, members were asked if they wanted to be on a map with regard to the Manidown land and its development, and that's both sides. And it also, I mean, I'm on it for Basingstoke. Also, we have members from Hampshire County Council. So things are going forward, looking as to what can be done with the land and how, and all that kind of thing. So that's quite a serious side. So things are moving forward. So everybody did have a chance to sit on that. Obviously, it will report at some point. But actually, that wasn't the question that came up afterwards.
Colleagues say, is there a suggestion that I'm omitted to put myself forward for the opportunity? We can't all take every opportunity that's afforded to us. We have other commitments in other committees.
I'm not quite sure what your question is. If you had put your name forward and you were able to sit on it, then that would have been fine.
Okay, so the point is that we need to have a more formal forward planning as we're getting into the sort of mobilisation now. I think Councillor Tucker was making the point that there has been an opportunity at the present time for members to engage in the pre-formal stages. Yes, so I think I'll take that point, but I don't want to dwell on it. Thank you.
I just wanted to add a little bit because people felt nothing was happening. No, my question, if I may, is with regard to in the summary of the lease on page 151. It says until development of Manidown land, to let the land on a farm business tenancy to Manidown company, but Philip just mentioned that it was, I thought, under Hampshire was sorting it out. Can you explain what is actually happening and who's looking after the land at the moment, please?
yeah, the land is actually managed on behalf of the Joint Manidown Committee by Hampshire County Council. So they're managing the day-to-day issues that come up on the land, but it's actually rented. They manage the leasing of the land to the Manidown company. So the Manidown company actually lease it and farm it and so on there, and then they pay the rent. But Hampshire County Council, well, they're looking after any issues that will come up. That makes sense.
Right, just going back to the point that related to the promotional expenses, quite clearly, well, I don't know, but if I was one of the trustees, I would be challenging those numbers when they came before me. Do we have a good audit trail for all of these numbers going, bearing in mind they go back to 2000, 2001? I don't know about your filing system, but, well, I do actually, because we've got some adverse comments on it, but I mean, we do need to be sure that we can we have full support for all the claims we make. Is that the case?
Yeah, as an officer who's been here since before 2001, I know that there are a number of files now which have got copies of invoices which go back to the start of this, that substantiate all the figures that are in here. So we have got that track. As you say, there's still the issue of agreeing them with the Many Down company, and it eventually comes to sorting the fund numbers out.
Okay, thank you, members. I think... Councillor Mitchell, sorry, I went overlooking.
Did signal earlier a little bit. This question of... I have a couple of questions. The first one is, or comments. The first one is about the promotional aspect and how it links with this idea of a JMC. The map is quite rightly, in my opinion, looking at how best to develop the land. That's its focus. That's what it should be focused on. You get very distracted if you're focused on anything else. It is not, explicitly not, and I hope it has no intention of being any sort of vehicle for looking at the legals and financials, because that should be done through a much more formal process of the council. And the map actually is supporting portfolio holder and not reporting to a committee, and I don't expect the map will produce a report, because maps usually don't produce reports unless they want to make a big fuss about something. So, and at the moment, members from all sides seem to be more or less of one heart on the map, which is very encouraging. However, what that means is, what we do know from that, is the amount being spent on promotion is going up very dramatically, and has to, and will do. And more money is being budgeted, or being asked for to be budgeted for it. And this puts a very sharp focus on resolving any issues and looking at saying what might be an issue between us and the county, between us and the landlord. And I've taken my other point I was going to make, related to the landlord has an option to buy back the lease. One of the positive things about the map is the way in which all members seem to be committed to, and all the people working for us and with us on this, committed to doing something really outstanding on that land, delivering the houses, of course, but doing it in such a way that it is exemplary for the people who will live there and the neighbouring people who live near it. And that is really high on our priority list. I don't like the idea that there's any risk of any kind whatsoever that something's going to dislodge that process, where some outfit comes along with a lot of money and says to the landlord, we can make a lot more money out of this doing it a different way from what we understand the council is thinking of doing. We could do a cheaper thing and make a hell of a lot more money. And therefore I do totally agree with the point that it is remarkable that we don't have a joint management company. We don't seem to have any mechanism in place in the council for understanding and where to raise the issues about these legal and financial aspects, and to question, sort of questions John is raising about the validity of the amounts claimed to be spent. And we're at the point where I hope that the county will go along with the idea that they will share all the costs with us on a 50-50 basis. But I take the view that, from what I'm seeing in the map, that we're making the running on where we should be going with this. And I like that, because it's in Basingstoke. It's not in Hampshire, as it were. So it is, I think, from this committee, we should be sending a message to the Cabinet and to the Chief Executive that says, look, we really, it's gone too long before we have a mechanism for sorting this out and knowing where we are with it. Very, very urgently indeed. Not by the end of the year. This week would be a good idea.
Chairman, could I just point out it's not in Basingstoke, it's in Wootton St Lawrence.
Yes, okay, I think what I'm getting the message of here is that there are a number of concerns raised through the questions that you've put forward this afternoon, which is about sort of the the ability to scrutinise sort of promotional and development costs, the ability to ensure that HCC, Hampshire rather, exercises its option in a timely manner rather than on a promise as we currently seem to be, and that some of these issues would best be managed through the constitution of a formal body now to take forward the planning in a less planning sense, the development and driving forward what happens to this piece of land. And certainly I think I'm happy to reflect those messages back both formally as part of the minutes of this, but also to do a short note to the portfolio holder and cabinet about this sort of committee's strength of feeling that we get into that position sooner rather than later. Aside from that, I think the other comments were around the table at 5.1 and the need to perhaps agree that, because if there is something that we feel, you know, as assuring as your comments were about having sort of detailed audit trail and records, the fact is we want to minimise level of surprises if these costs are presented for recovery. So we would like to sort of be clear that that table is properly reflected and can be dealt with, and is perhaps given early sight to the trustees so that they are aware of what we are accruing in level of cost.
On page 153 of 175, or page 11 in the report, right at the end, we exercise the option, we get planning consent to exercise the option and pay the trustees 50% of the added value associated with commercial development. I assume that we've budgeted for that, because we might get planning permission for some of it within the next budget cycle, and it could be a very substantial amount of money.
It's not in the current budget, if that's what you're asking. No. It's being looked at. So yeah, being looked at in terms of the future medium-term financial strategy. Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, members? Councillor Harvey. Yeah.
Then I kind of thank Philip for the report and say actually, despite all the questions and all the bits, it's a very good report and thank you. I'd quite like a pink paper attached to the back of that with your thoughts then, Kevin. Because if those thoughts and conversations are taking place, then I'd quite like, I'd like it not to be a pink paper, to be perfectly honest. My view is always that it shouldn't, we shouldn't use pink papers if we don't have to. But if it has to, somewhere, if this comes back at the next stage, just to give us an understanding of where your thoughts are, even if it's just a position statement of where your thoughts are, I'd still like to see that on what you think the 3-year picture might look like.
Yeah, I was going to say, and also it might be beyond the 4-year medium-term financial strategy. In fact, it will be beyond the 4-year medium-term financial strategy. And remember, this is a report bringing together the financial bit. The Many Down project is being project managed and delivered through a separate stream as well. So and also there is the Many Down exec, yes, which agrees elements of the budget for expenditure on some of these items that you've been asking about. So there are various strands across the council.
Okay, members, if you're content, do you wish to have any further comment or debate, or are we happy to note the statement? Thank you very much. Okay. That moves us on to paper F, which is regarding the webcasting of council meetings. Yeah, well, I think you can introduce. Kevin's going to introduce the paper.
Got.
I wasn't going to say anything. I wasn't going to be mischievous. So let's introduce the paper.
I have the IT manager with me for any detailed questions that members might have. But this is a report that follows on from the request to look at webcasting, and it gives some background about the history of webcasting and its success and failure rates. In terms generally, it's a 95%, given the volume of meetings that are webcast, it's a 95% success rate in terms of those webcasts. But the report then goes on and gives sort of 5 options where the council could go to improve the current webcasting, because the current technology is old and it is getting past its sell-by date in terms of the encoding and delivery of the webcasting. But it's also currently a very cheap system to operate. So there are 5 options there. Some of those options depend upon whether the council intends to carry on webcasting in the same way. If we continue, if the view is that webcasting should remain for all meetings, live webcasting and then archived, then that takes you down a certain route. But there are 5 options there to do a minimum, option 1 to do a minimum sort of hardware update and to leave the level of IT support as it currently is. Option 2 would reduce the level of webcasting potentially to key meetings rather than all meetings, but again leave the level of IT support as it is at the moment via the on-call route. Option 3 is for live webcasting, archive all the meetings as currently and provide live and archive and provide medium hardware upgrade, but to increase the dedicated IT support, so that's an additional staff cost. Option 4 is to enhance the provision of the technology that provides the actual webcast and the access to that webcast, but to leave the IT support alone. And option 5 is to look to see whether you could do it completely by a third party to get somebody else to try and webcast all of the meetings for us. So those are the 5 options that we came to as options, and the report details those options. Under all of them, I think we're saying that one of the things that we can do is we can store the archives on YouTube as a method of access, so that is a wider access for the public. But really, it's for any questions obviously first, but then over to members, because the report's asking for members' comments on the options in general, and on particularly the recommended way forward is option 4, which is the enhanced hardware and the current level of IT support. Thank you.
Okay, so for questions and comments, I've got Councillor Harvey first, and then Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you for the report. My comment would be that webcasting, I think, is incredibly important, because it is a formal public record of the meeting in a way that is modern and ticks the boxes, and you can do social media, and it ticks the whole idea of, from a democratic perspective, I think, of doing the job that we should be doing to record our meetings in an appropriate way. So I support it. I do support the idea of webcasting wholeheartedly. Ownership-wise, I have a problem with option 5. We should continue to own, we should continue to maintain, because it is ours as a record of our meetings, rather than leasing it out to a third party in any way, shape or form, who may not always have security, or may not always have the kind of standards that we want. Nonetheless, that's just a concern, I guess. I would like to see that reassured if that was an option that was went for. Personally, I've got no issue with option 4. I think that fits the box perfectly in terms of what you're suggesting, and I do note in the report it says quite clearly that those costs can be recovered from ongoing savings inside the IT budget. If that is the case, and that's the way we stand, then I don't see any reason why option 4 shouldn't be pursued unless members want to go further than that. And I wouldn't have a problem with that either, considering the sort of costs we are talking about. So yeah, webcasting is good. Let's carry on with it. Let's make it as best as we can make it within a reasonable amount in the context of the budget. If it can be recovered in savings, great. And let's continue to own it ourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker.
Thank you. I speak as somebody who is totally and utterly non-IT, so bear with me. What I don't understand with the different options, for the 1, 2 and 3, it says about IT support for issues. No, next bit. Device, phones, tablets, access, etc., etc. And that seems to cover 1, 2 and 3. But when you come to 4, they don't mention anything to do with any of these phones and tablets and goodness knows what else. Is that an omission, or is that covered?
Yeah, With the first three options, it's around upgrading the existing equipment, which won't support or will provide limited support for iPads and iPhones. Option 4 does provide support for iPads and iPhones, etc. Yeah, that's the enhancement over the existing.
Councillor Mitchell.
I'm with Councillor Harvey on this. Just a question, however, before I comment. The table on page 158 or 5 of 6, I do assume that the additional revenue cost is annual. That's revenue used. That is correct.
That's correct.
Thank you. Well, it seems to be option 4. It looks as if it's been engineered to be the option. On that basis, from a financial point of view, option for 5 makes absolutely no sense of any kind whatsoever. But I agree with Paul there. It seems to me that doing anything other than doing what we do now but doing it better is going backwards. We're going back into a previous world. I'm quite proud of the fact that we're one of the few councils, and that we were so early in the game, that webcasts everything. In fact, that very few people might look at most of it. We all use it. We all use it to go back and look at what happened in a meeting. We all use it. And frankly, the capital cost of £25,000, if you think about the cost of this meeting, and the cost of a council meeting, and the cost of a cabinet meeting, the cost of all our meetings, the capital cost of that is trivial. It's trivial even by human standards, as opposed to what auditors talk about as trivial. It seems to be a decision that makes itself. My view on it is, we should, if it's in that ballpark, we shouldn't try and do it as cheaply as we can. We should do it as best as we can. And if it was 30,000 as opposed to 25,000, because that's we believe, a more reliable solution, or because, and I always take this view in IT things, because it has more users, wouldn't want to go with a system that's very adventurous and has 7 people using it. It's nice to have the comfort that 200,000 people using it or something. 200 people, because they're all putting pressure on the developer, and he's getting the income to fix the thing and go forward. So I would certainly go with option 4 without the slightest hesitation, and let's pair the thing. And the other thing is, well, from a point of view getting on with it now, it's nice that it could be recovered from savings on the existing IT budget. I don't regard that as being necessarily the right way to fund it, but I won't go on with that because that's not my business. If IT don't want, can afford not to have that 25,000, that's fine by me, but we should think, as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather we found £25,000 from something else rather than.
Thank you, Councillor Leake.
For the record, we don't all look at webcasts. I don't look at webcasts, and I don't look back to see what happened, because frankly, I've got more interesting things to do. But I am aware that some people do. But I am drawn to paragraph 3.3, which says Basingstoke is the only council in Hampshire to webcast all of its meetings. By implication, the only other one that does is HCC, but only partially. I don't know what the national position is, but it doesn't sound as though there's a great enthusiasm for it. And then I look down at 3.7, and I see 110 views per month, and the archive is viewed on average 360 times per month. And then I say to myself, well, that's probably officers trying to check out, as they write the minutes, what actually happened. So we haven't any sort of hard evidence of the need for this. That said, I am conscious that we do say on frequent occasions that part of our minuting system is actually the webcast. So I'd be interested to know how other councils deal with minutes. I know we've improved our minutes, but do other councils have more extensive minutes, or how do they cope with the problem of looking back? And is it really true that, or could you tell me how many of the 360 times per month are actually officers here just checking out, rather than individuals or residents wanting to find out what happened? I'm not opposed to it, but I do often question why it's really necessary.
I'm, other than trawling the many council websites from around the country, it's going to be difficult to find how they do because there are a multitude of different ways. I localised on Hampshire specifically because they were a good peer group to choose, and I speak to some of the IT managers, but I can do a quick look around perhaps some of the larger authorities and find that out. But generally, most go down the third-party route because it's new. With regards to how many are officers, I'll have a look at that and see what I can find out from the stats on the website.
The point really is that in other countries, I mean, despite the importance of democracy, I'm probably not quite so keen on democracy as other people. And I do understand people like to see what's going on. It is interesting that we're the only council that has actually bothered to set up webcasting, and it's something that's been around for quite some time, and nobody else seems to be terribly concerned about it. And I am concerned about the additional cost, of course.
Being an early adopter doesn't necessarily make us wrong, but I take the point that it's right to challenge the usage and appropriately track how we use it and make the best of it. However, I would point out that one of the reasons why we have this paper before us was a result of the independent audit governance report we had earlier this year, and that did make quite a lot of emphasis on the fact that we took great strides to record public meetings. They were a point of reference for the future, and whilst they might not be totally used by the public or indeed ourselves individually at this point in time, they did provide an unassailable record of the conduct of this business in public meetings, and that was something that was commended as good practice by the independent report, and one of the reasons why we then thought we better look at any enhancements. So points taken and good points and questions to ask. Councillor Parker also will say something. It's approaching 5 o'clock, members, so we need to move standing orders to say that we can continue and hear from Councillor Parker. Are you agreed with that? Maybe I shouldn't have put that rider on. Are we agreed to move standing orders, folks? That's a yes then, is it? Thank you very much. Councillor Parker.
So kind. I don't recall being part of the original decision to go this way, but I would imagine the spirit of it's got to have been openness and transparency of the council in the manner it conducts its business, and I think that in itself is the right direction. Cost-wise, the system that we've got isn't as reliable as we would want it to be, and so I think for me it's either go back to pen and pad and then typed up more fully detailed minutes, because you need to have that system, and I would imagine then in going backwards in that direction there would be then an additional costing coming out of committee services in officer requirement. So overall, on the basis of the options that have been offered to us, yes, as Councillor Harvey says, ownership is to my part very important. And one question I have of the officer would just be, could you identify for me what the current revenue cost is, please?
There's no current cost to the system. The software is unsupported, as is the hardware.
So the 2,000 is just a new one-off. The additional revenue cost you're showing of 2,000, we haven't got an existing cost revenue. Cost currently to operate and manage it.
It's not that's to do with the licensing cost, there isn't, and the hardware, there isn't an addition, there isn't a cost to that. There's obviously an officer time cost, but that's consistent throughout all of the options, except the options that would require additional staff support. So at the moment, that we haven't costed those out, but those are consistent across all the options, whilst we maintain the webcast.
So, okay, I take it where we are, it's an additional cost over and above the other schemes. And I wanted just to ask the officer, on the option 4 that we're showing here, it's talking about using dedicated webcasting hardware. And like in anything in IT, the nervousness of, the robustness of the system that's being put in, is this accepted to be well tested and proved piece of kit?
Initial research shows yes. I was pointed to a number of commercial broadcasters who use this technology, first particularly shopping channels, unfortunately, that use this technology to stream their channels onto the internet.
Councillor Tucker, you had another question for us.
Not quite sure what shopping channels are, so it shows how ignorant I am. But my other question was that connected to these things, bless their cotton socks, we did go into kind of an experiment, I think that's the word I should use, into electronic voting. Is that connected to this as well? I'm not saying I'm promoting it in any way, shape or form, because it's been a disaster up till now. But I just...
Do you really want to raise the electronic voting at this time of the day?
I think I've said enough.
But I think, yeah, if we can get a brief answer that doesn't go into the vagaries of electronic voting, it would be helpful.
This isn't connected to electronic voting.
Thank you. Moving swiftly on. So I think the general consensus there, with some reservation on cost and need from Council League, is that option 4 is indeed supported, and we wish to proceed down that route as our recommendation. It goes to the portfolio.
We discussed the portfolio holdings.
Okay, that brings us to the
Councillor Joe Bodina.
Okay, moving swiftly on so that I don't lose your attention and
brought to you by
concentration.
Costa Coffee.
No, we're at shopping channels, so no adverts allowed on council websites. Okay, this brings us to paper G, which is our final paper of the afternoon, the update on electronic document management system and committee services software. So I will ask.
Thank you, Chair. This was a paper that the committee requested last time. It follows on from the Independence Governance Report and particular recommendations around that, and I said I'd bring back a sort of where the council is in terms of some of those areas, and really it covers 3 sort of areas. One, the information management, retention and disposal policy, and the report just highlights that has been updated, and the rollout of that across the council is in progress. It covers electronic document management system, and it explains that that's a corporate application, but it's not used across all businesses all the time. It's in certain areas of the council, but that now has a retention and disposal electronic module that again is being rolled out on a team by team basis, starting with HR, moving to council tax and benefits, and then further in this year and next year. And the third element covers the fact that the members service, the committee services and the members portal type solution, along with the way that agendas are generated and displayed on the website, and that is a bespoke in-house system that's now being looked at for replacement at early stages for replacement by committee section. And again, it highlights that that there's some soft market testing going on that, and then there will be a specification with an anticipated installation in 1415. And open for questions, Chair.
Councillor Harvey, you put your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you for the report. The points I wanted to bring out really weren't necessarily in the report, but relate directly to the IGR and what fell out of that. because I read the report, and it's all well and good, and appreciate what you're saying, and then I look back at what Ernst & Young was saying. When it comes to records of council meetings and formal business of the council and particular decision-making processes of the council, for example, cabinet decisions and so on, one thing I'm very acutely aware of is that there were significant gaps of record going back to the middle of the 90s that related to the place of this under discussion, under investigation, and that those documents had gone missing and are still missing, as I understand it, to date. Now, what concerned me was we have a record before that, we then have a missing set of records, and we have records after that. Now, I have never had, in any forum, an answer as to why those particular records of that particular time are not full, yet before and after we have full records. Now, luckily, there were a number of us that were able to call on members who still had a personal record of a significant amount of that paperwork, which helped us in giving evidence to the Ernst & Young and helped us in that process because we were able to call on those documents. They weren't officially kept or saved or archived here. So that's, forget the electronic bit for a moment, forget the bits that you're talking about in terms of process, Kevin. Still, the issue is how we've archived formally the paper record of those times, and they're really important because who knows, in 5 years, in 10 years, we may wish to look back. We may need to look back for a particular purpose and reason on a particular paper record of the decision making, the formal processes. I'm not talking about all the other bits of paperwork, I'm just specifically talking about those. And they need to be archived and secured. And my concern really is what the IGR said was they were not secured, they were not saved, and that there are quite glaring gaps actually just from that particular time period over the 95, 96, 94 period.
No, Chair, no, other than to maybe produce a brief update on, I can't answer the particular question, but in terms of where are we now with physical paper decision making, I know, for example, that they're all being bound in a way that some of them weren't previously. So everything, but we can do a quick note of what that actual procedure is, but I know that that's been looked at, and the formal binding and stamping of minutes and has been caught up with and is continuing. But maybe a bit of an update for the committee just on that element we can provide.
And I guess what I would like, just to round everything out, would be just a note to suggest either what happened to those paper records, if anybody has an ability to recall that. I doubt that anybody in the offices can do that. I mean, I appreciate that. But nonetheless, a record of what is missing, because that was the bit that concerned me. Here we have a piece of work being undertaken by external auditors, and the paperwork relevant to that was missing. Now that was a concern obviously to them, and it's a concern to me as a member.
Councillor Mitchell.
On a slightly different point, I just for information, on page 166, item 3.8, in progress. I think it's done, that particular bit, because as chairman I am now invited every time to initial each page and sign the document. But it says sign each page. I've taken the view that initialing each page is probably sufficient. And so I think before we get that sort of enshrined into constitutional things, if I had to sign each page, it's very laborious, even though my signature is sloppy and much practiced. On a more germane point, and everybody else will, the eyes will glaze over, but the IT manager will know of what I speak, and that is the key documents of this council are reports. There's all sorts of other things going around, and everything should be retained and accessible. But I have banged my head up against this for many years, and I never understand why we don't do it. But the reports are, I still think, mainly produced as Word documents. The evidence superficially says that, when in fact they should be driven through the data management system. And you shouldn't be able to produce a report without using it. So you should have a form, and the report is entered as a form, and therefore the system then knows that report exists as soon as you start writing it. The system knows what it's about because you've got the headings and so forth, and you have all the text. They're all in a formal structure, so it calls for a report format, data capture thing at the point where you write them. And there's no more difficulty typing into a form than typing into a Word document. The big change is I can then find that report through the search system, knowing the things I know about it. Whereas with the Word document, I've no chance. No? And I know we keep saying that we are improving or have improved the search system, but it seems to me nonsensical that we don't require every department that produces a report to use a form as the basis for creating the report. And,
No, I agree. It's certainly to make finding information is to have that information in the right place. I think from recollection, when we undertook some of the soft market testing of some of the committee admin software solutions, is that was certainly how a number of them work. Not all of them, but how a number of them work. That you would register that you're writing a report, who the author, when, what committee, what date, and you would start capturing some of that information, and you could start building your report in that way. So certainly when we're building the specification, that could be something that we can look at to include in the specification for when we're doing the procurement process.
Yes, I do understand what you say. I mean, obviously there's the balance between Word is fairly, we've got corporate templates for Word. The issue is which is a form. And I think for committee type reports, you could well see, as Paul was suggesting, a system that sort of forces you down that route because it is the most efficient way of storing and recording. Obviously, there's also options that we've looked at before, but of using metadata and using tags on all of the reports in a more formalised way, so that it's easier to search for things because you have to fill in certain metadata descriptors on a Word report that makes you find them. But I think, I mean, all we can really say is it's an area that can be looked at as part of the committee system, and I can't see that it would be something that would, not every report potentially would be in that format that the council uses. Well, all formal reports, you may end up with that. I'm just thinking about flexibility. It depends how the system operates. If there's no difference and it's perfectly usable and than using Word, but I'm not sure how many people use that type of system as opposed to using Word for their reports. But I think it is something that we may be driven down if the system for the committee cycle has that as a way of capturing the information. And I think we need to do that piece of work first.
the thing is, when I raise this, it's always regarded as revolutionary and shocking and new and novel and difficult. I'm trying to work out how many years ago, without being too boring, but what year in 2013, so it would have been about 1976 or 63, 73. However many that is, 40, I think, is it? 40 years ago, I was explaining to lawyers, how to do this, and a law firm on this side of the road was doing it and going out and singing about it. Law firm on this side of the road didn't understand what they were talking about. Couldn't think why they might want to do such a thing. Strangely enough, law firm on this side of the road was making a hell of a lot more profit than law firm on that side of the road because its costs were dramatically lower, and it knew where everything was. And this is not new rocket science. It's a very, very old thing to do. And I'm not suggesting all the appendices, because your accounting reports and so forth have all sorts of appendices that don't fit the normal report format. It's the report bit. And there's nothing different from doing it in Word at all. No difference. You get no more flexibility in Word than you do in putting a form on the computer.
Councillor Parker, you had a question for us as well. Okay, fine. Okay. I think I get from that then a couple of points in summary is that sort of welcoming the sort of the move or rollout of electronic document management across the council. but we must ensure and be assured that the physical record keeping is as good as it can be. Now, we need to identify where we can significant gaps in information that we already know that we have, and as recent experience shows, where we know things are not there, then we should at least make a record of what is missing, so that we don't waste time and energy looking for it perhaps at some future point. The point about sort of clarifying whether paper should be signed or initialed at each page, it should be a simple update to the table. And really want to make sure that whatever system we put in place, we appropriately specify it so that it maximizes the use of online forms, online approaches, templated activities, so that it's one in, easy to search, easy to use, and minimizes effort, and accept that may well be a change in different behaviors, but it's a change for the better if it's efficient for us in the long run and helps us find things and support our audit trail and record keeping. So with those sort of comments in mind, I think, yes. Go on then.
Just briefly, could I make a request that we've had one or two comments made about this as to who is the portfolio holder? Can on reports also indicate the portfolio holder by name?
Yes, well, I shall certainly make a record of that.
Obviously, cabinet reports and portfolio holder reports already do, but regulatory committee reports, such as audit committee, tend not to, because but there could be some reference to the particular item where it relates to a particular portfolio holder. Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to say.
By name.
I don't think it makes any issue at all to extend that opening table with a reference to the lead portfolio holder. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, members, if you're content with those comments and addition, I think we are done. Thank you very much. We note the report. Thank you very much, and have a good evening all. Thank you.